And we are live.
Hello, everyone. This is Gary Ware reporting live for the ASC. It is our monthly webinar, and it's been a while, but we are back. So excited to talk about this. Um, Basic, scary, but very powerful topic of having curious conversations, especially with family members during challenging, not necessarily during challenging times, but just holiday seasons here. You're probably going to see your family members more than you normally do, and we often have differences of opinion. And how can we do that with grace and save relationships so that Aunt Millie doesn't go back home to Minnesota pissed off at you, and then it starts a riff for a whole 365 days. So anywho, yeah, super excited to dive into that. But before we get started, let us know in the chat whether you're watching live or the replay. And I'm going to turn it over to April. She is this way, I believe, to kick us off with some updates and tell you who we are. Who is this ASC? What does it even mean?
Yes, and we're going to give a quick shout out to Terry who joined us live. Hi, Terry. I'm super excited for this conversation today and to just help all of you who may be having some anxiety around like, oh my gosh, we got to spend family time. How do we make sure that, everybody is happy? And, sometimes even though the holidays can be such a joyous time that it is opportunity for that deep connection, which can also, if you have, as Gary was saying, differing opinions and whatnot, like it can be a challenge, and you obviously don't want to go into a holiday having the intention of, or feeling like you're going to potentially hurt relationships more than help. So, but before that, just wanted to share, just in case you don't know who we are, if you're stumbling upon this webinar on YouTube, or if you have just heard about this from Gary or Rebecca or I, we are the leadership team for the Accountability Success Circle. This is a community that has been around since 2017. We are focused on a year-round growth process, but really focused on helping adults accomplish their goals in all areas of life. We don't just, we are an anti-hustle culture where we just want to make sure that you're doing the things that matter the most, and you do it in a way that is the most fun, the most healthy, and the most balanced way possible. And so we do have a system of kicking off an annual retreat, which happened this past October. And Dee just hopped on, so hi Dee, you're getting your shout outs. This is a community that is focused on helping you throughout the year, as we go through the seasons, helping you in all different areas of life. And we're an amazing community that is super, super supportive. And so a lot of us are slowly gearing up to kick off 2024 strong, and you might be somebody who hasn't even thought about 2024 yet. But if you want to take a more proactive stance to your life, we are definitely a community to check out. So check us out at accountabilitysuccesscircle.com. We've got a whole bunch of people who have amazing things to share, and just amazing people all around who are doing amazing things. So we want to support each other in that. So check us out if you need that extra accountability to get the things that will light you up done in the best way possible. So with that, let's get started on this awesome topic. Gary, I'll turn it back to you.
Yay, awesome. A round of applause for April. She's over here. And as you can tell by this beautiful blue background, I am not in my home studio. I'm out on location, so I don't have the sound effects and whatnot, but it's all good. And so this is just a conversation between April and myself and you watching, regardless if you're watching live or the replay. But since our theme or focus, as we go into the holidays, is family. One of the things that comes up a lot is communication with family, and how can you communicate with grace, even in situations where you don't see eye to eye, because that's going to happen. And I read an amazing book that I brought with me. I highly recommend checking this out. I'm just going to give you some tips from the book, but it's not even going to break the surface. I never thought of it that way. How to have fearlessly curious conversations in dangerously divided times. Author, her name is Monica Guzman. I've had the pleasure meeting her in person and seeing her speak. She's an amazing person. So, Monica, if you're seeing this, hey, what's up? And she first, started thinking about this in 2016. And if you are watching this in the U.S., oh my gosh! So I'm outside in the open. I heard like a loud horn, someone saying something. I thought it was an emergency, but just some jerks with a big truck. Anyway, so in 2016, that's when Trump was elected as president, and that made a big divide, amongst just people in the U.S., family members and stuff like that. And she remembered, and she talks about that in her intro of going to watch the polls and stuff like that. And she is a I believe first generation immigrant, Mexican immigrant here to the U.S. And her parents voted for Trump in 2016, and it was just like a big it just sort of caught her off guard. Like, how could you? However, these are her parents, and she didn't want to just scrap the relationship. Said, all right, forget you. I'm never talking to you again. And she talked about that, and she talked about what she went through and how she was able to essentially, have some curious conversations, which I'm going to teach you some techniques here, and start to see eye to eye with folks, even though you don't agree, and have some civil discourse, so that you can both leave sort of respecting each other. Now, so I say all that, but I'm going to say this disclaimer: one, I am not a therapist. April is not a therapist. Yes, we are licensed coaches. So the things that we're giving here is just advice based on our own experiences and the things that we have learned, and we want to share that with you. But not all relationships are equal. You may be thinking to yourself, yeah, I hear you, Gary. However, my estranged father is toxic and blah blah blah. Totally get it. You choose how you want to use this and with who you want to use this with. So I just want to put that there. And so first thing, I want to just turn this over, and I want to hear from April. Is have you had a disagreement with family members, and what was that like? So let's just sort of start the base, the bar there, and then Terry and Dee, if you want to share in the chat. You don't have to share specifics, but just curious, or is everything perfect, and your family see eye to eye, and you don't have anything like this?
Yeah, and I think that this is helpful to know the perspectives that we are speaking from. So I will, openly share that I love my family, both sides of my family, and me and my husband, I think we're probably, we would consider ourselves like kind of middle of the road. We're trying to stay open-minded to, both sides and whatnot. And we obviously have maybe a slightly more socially liberal view, fiscally conservative, just so that where my head's at. We both have families who have relatively conservative viewpoints, both on the religion and political views. And so that has definitely been a point of contention in family conversations, and it's always been something that I have tried personally to navigate, because I am in the Enneagram world, I am the whatever number that is, just want everybody to play nice and get along, and not have the conflict. But those two topics are something that are a little bit heated in our family conversations. And so this is a topic that is super important to me. And not, I'm not placing any bias on, what's right and what's wrong, because there is no right and wrong, but it's trying to understand, you know, we have to accept each other's differences, and how do we do that in a way that can still honor the relationship? Because I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure that there are relationships that could have been damaged, but if you are somebody who wants to prioritize the relationship despite the differences, I think this is going to be a good conversation. Right, Gary? Am I on the right path?
Exactly.
Is that what
Yeah,
we're talking about today?
you're on the right path. That boom, boom, boom. Got it. Yes. So thank you. And yeah, a little bit, for me, yeah, we've had very, similar sort of conversation. So, on one side of my sort of extended family, yeah, very conservative views, as far as similar, like religion and politics, and other sort of things of that nature. And so, they tend to say, "Oh, y'all West Coasters. We live in California. Me and my immediate family and my dad and sisters and mom and whatnot. Um, you know, so liberal and stuff like that. And the first thing uh, is we generalize, and if you talk to any sort of therapist or whatnot, generalization is not a good thing because it comes with the whole point of that is shortcuts. In our brains, these are called heuristics. Our brain's number one job is to keep you alive. So if the brain can shortcut things, it helps it make decisions. It helps you, be efficient. However, when we generalize things, it's very loaded. It comes with a lot of like sort of presuppositions. Like we preconceive these things to be true. So, like for example, if we say the word liberal or conservative, you don't have to answer out loud, but like what comes to mind, like when you think those things, so that's the first thing is try not to use generalizations because yes, someone may be liberal in one area, but again maybe have very conservative views in another. We're very complex beings, and matter of fact, yeah, like my it's funny. So my immediate family is considered extremely liberal. However, my dad, and I don't know if it's just because he's a boomer, he's like getting old and whatnot. I think of him as more on the conservative side, and he's learning, and he'll admit that he's and it's just again upbringing, past, and people are doing the best that they can with what they have. And that's the second thing is, and again I say this as a starting point, and I know that some relationships aren't meant to be mended, so again, don't do it as a blanket thing. But again, if you really value the relationship and want to keep that, the first thing is don't use generalizations. The other is assume positive intent. Just know that maybe someone's ill-informed, or again from their experience. We're going to get into some specifics in a moment, but those things sort of popped up for me. But is very complex. And I know there was some heated discussion within my extended family on the topic of sexuality. And it was really interesting how, certain members were very steadfast, like, not even opening, to think of anything other than the definition of a man with a man. Like anything outside of that is just blasphemy and stuff like that. And it did.
Oh, Gary, I can't hear you. I don't know if this is.
Someone ended up passing away, not because of the conversation, but just in general. And those relationships weren't mended prior to that. And the family members that were more on with a fixed mindset really regretted that afterwards of not mending the relationship. So again, that is there's a lot of new research on regret. And those are some of the things that as we get older, we start to like really think about what's important. Yeah, we regret not sort of, seeing people for who they are and stuff like that. Um, so I want to start with a few definitions. Communication. Um, First question is, what is your like, and I know it may vary depending on circumstances. So like, let's put this in the frame of with your family. Do you tend to be more passive? Do you tend to confront? Do you tend to be more aggressive or dismissive? Like, what is your sort of communication style? Especially when things may get a little bit challenging. So I'll answer as well. Um, and yeah, April, start with you.
Yeah. So those of you who are watching or, listening to this, we're kind of modeling the conversation that you should be having with yourself, right? So the question is, what is your communication style? I am 100% passive based on those. I tend to not want conflict at all. And so um, if that will help avoid conflict, I will just not engage in any behavior that would lend itself um, to the conflict. So if passive is the way to describe it, that's what I would be. How about
Yeah.
you, Gary?
Um, I can be passive. And then lately, so interesting. I find I found myself more on the aggressive side. So most people don't know the difference between passive, assertive, and aggressive. Um, and maybe I was more on the assertive side. I'll tell you definition in just a moment. But when you tend to be more of the passive, like trying to keep the peace, uh, you know, when it comes to like confrontations, you sort of subvert that. Um, Being assertive seems aggressive. But yeah, I'm one of the sort of keep the peace and whatnot. So this is pop quiz question. What is the definition of assertive, passive, and aggressive communication? Does anyone know? April, would you like to take a guess?
Um, so I think what I would like to say is in the spectrum of things. So passive is a little bit more avoidant. Um, and then assertive is kind of speaking your truth, but from maybe like an open-minded or non-judgmental perspective, where it's like you're not imposing opinion, but more maybe a little bit more logical or stating the facts, but making it be known so that you're not in the avoidance stage. And then aggressive would be um more on the imparting emotion and potentially blame or judgment along with your assertiveness. Maybe. I don't know. Oh,
Cool.
so Terry said he's mostly passive, but the more comfortable he is around, he can be more assertive. And he also said, I always feel like I'm being aggressive when I'm trying to be assertive. So,
All
okay.
right. So to have assertive communication is to both respect or have respect for the person that you're talking to and yourself. Um, and so that is assertive. So again, for someone who tends to be passive, um, you may see assertive as a little bit aggressive. So to be passive, you don't uh, it's not sorry, respect is the wrong word. Um, it's basically I'm going to use respect because it's another R word that I can't think, and we need to go on. But when you're passive, you don't respect. Oh, yeah, respect the rights. So you respect the rights of both yourself and the other person when you're assertive, and when you're passive, you don't respect your rights. Which means that yes, you will. Yes, you're holding back, and your intention is to keep the peace. However, there are some things that maybe are left unsaid, which a passive person that do not express those things can turn into passive aggressive. And passive aggressive means that you are holding baggage on things that happen, and in certain situations, you start to, I told you, look at you, you start to bring it back in very sort of other ways, and it sometimes has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. So again, that's passive aggressive. Aggressive, you're not respecting the rights of the other person, and when I mean respecting the rights, you're degrading. You may be using words that are belittling and things like that. And so that those are the three. Those are the definitions of the various communications. I'm going to just sort of pump the brakes and April, because I saw you go. So I love to hear your reflection on that after hearing those definitions.
I think that before I do that, Dee had she said that she has to hop off, but she'll listen to the rest. But she also said, I usually don't like to say anything during family gatherings, but will be honest about my opinions if pushed. I find it doesn't change their opinions anyways, which I'm assuming we're going to talk about, the difference between like talking and stating your opinion and trying to change somebody's opinion.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that, Dee, and we'll see you for the rest of the webinar, not live. So the definition, I mean, I think it's so, the way that you put it is so, it's almost like very, very clear cut, right? But what's really interesting is this, being passive is almost being a disservice to you. Which I think that there may be ways that you can be passive where that might need to be the solution, which we can talk about a little bit later, right? You might need to be passive if the situation doesn't lend itself to, if it tends to become something that is aggressive, that might have to be the solution in special cases. But when you think about being passive, it's, you're just kind of letting somebody else kind of steer either the conversation or the vibe or the topic. So if you don't want to be in that place of just kind of like taking it, if you can work more towards the assertive space, maybe that's ideal in a sense, but it also is under the notion that the people you're interacting with can also operate from that same space, right? Because it is that push and pull of aggressiveness versus avoidance, and how do you kind of get yourself to the middle. And so I think it is, that assertiveness is that balance of shared respect, which I think is where we all should try to aim for. It's just a matter of where do you need to slide on the scale, depending on, because you obviously can't control the other half of the conversation. So it's figuring out where you need to be in order to, not have this humongous explosion. But I think that the healthiest place to be is to have a mutually assertive stance, maybe.
Yes. And I want to bring up something that you mentioned, April. Yes, you may need to like sort of defer, sort of communication with something. So let's just take a scenario so we can talk about like the passive, assertive, and aggressive. So since we're talking about family, we're just going to throw it out there. Say there's a conversation about sexuality, and you're at a family gathering, and then your relative, whoever it is saying derogatory terms about someone's sexuality, and your stance on that is that people should be able to show up however they want to show up, and it doesn't hurt you. And matter of fact, we shouldn't use terms that
are hateful,
are hateful or dehumanize people. So that's your stance. And so you're brought into the conversation. So a passive a passive version of that would be to like sort of deflect, deny, like sort of go away, just leave altogether. And I'm going to talk about what you mentioned about like sort of maybe the correct answer for the situation is to just defer. But passive, or you might just go along with them. because again, you want to keep the peace, and maybe that person's a person of authority, and you don't want them to be mad, and then how that doesn't respect you, and you is now you are not standing up for your values, and you're letting someone else sort of steamroll you, and put their opinion into your mouth. And so afterwards, especially, that it's probably passive. If after the conversation, maybe you feel like, oh, man, I should have said these things. Now, there's always a do-over. So most people, again, I'll talk about that. So that's the passive. The aggressive is just, again, aggressive is not respecting the rights of the other person. And maybe because you're just sick and tired of Uncle Ted, being a bigot and a racist. You're like, you know what, Uncle Ted? Fuck you. Maybe, this, and this, and you just go off on them. Like, how dare you? Like, and again, you start calling them names. That is very aggressive. Again, you're not respecting that other person's rights. Again, respecting someone's rights doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. An assertive one, and we're going to talk about some strategies to help you be more of assertive, would say, start to put in some of the strategies. I'm going to sort of get into this and tell you some of them, but maybe it's like an open-ended question. What do you mean by that, Uncle Ted? Or, or they bring you in, hey, I see where you're coming from. I unfortunately don't have that opinion. I think X, Y, and Z, and by you just stating your opinion is assertive. You're respecting your rights. You're respecting their rights. Now, this is the thing about sort of deflecting. Like, if you don't want to have this conversation, so by leaving the conversation does not necessarily mean it's passive. You can say, you know what, that's not something I want to talk about in this moment. I'm, I suggest we change the topic, or I'm going to excuse myself and I'm going to go over here. Again, you are, sort of stating your preference, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're passive, because sometimes, and I ask a lot of folks, like, why are you passive, or consider yourself passive? And some folks, they think it's because they can't process that fast. They need time to think about their response, and that is a complete valid thing. That is respecting your rights. If you need time to think about something, you're in every right to say, hey, you know what? This is not something I want to discuss right now. I really want to think it over and read up on that. I'm happy to discuss this with you, after I've done X, Y, and Z. April, what are your thoughts on that scenario?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, because I think that there are a lot of times that I will just be passive, because I know that in previous times trying to be assertive was not helpful, and usually led me to be more aggressive. So it's like, why even go down that path? But I'm now wondering that, and sometimes it's usually a conversation that maybe I brought up, like, that then incited a feeling or an opinion from a family member. So it was like maybe I unintentionally started something that then escalated, as a response. And then I have to kind of shut it down. And there's that piece of, and this is so nuanced, because there's, people are so different, and it's a very sensitive topic. And so trying to decide on whether or not you just deflect completely, or is it, can you take it to, instead of just being completely passive, um to to be a little bit more on the assertive side, to just verbalize and say, okay, I'm concerned that this conversation might lead somewhere that we don't want to go, so let's change the topic. So almost even just verbalizing that outward, so that for those of you who are like, I need to speak my truth, but I know it's going to backfire, to be able to say, okay, we're starting to go in the wrong direction. Let's talk about something else. I think is a little bit more of an assertive way to deflect. Is that?
Yeah. And
Okay.
especially, so yeah, that's perfect. And the other thing too is, we should go into these situations. Our goal here is not to change someone. Our goal here is, not to prove that you're right. Again, when that is the mo, then we start to get into those like sort of duke it out situations. But yeah, if you're like, all right, this is a hot button topic. They have very stern, stern sort of stance on this, and this is not the place to have this conversation. It is very assertive to one acknowledge, hey, you know what? I can tell that it's getting a little tense. We're at dinner. It's time to be thankful. I say that let's table this for now. Let's change the topic to something else. So what do you think of the Bears? Yeah, yeah, I don't know. And then you can like sort of interject something. So you're absolutely right. That's not a passive way. Again, because again, remember what passive is usually, and a lot of times, if someone is just habitually passive, they don't realize that resentment is bottling up. So that way you're still respecting your own rights. You're respecting their rights, and you're choosing not to engage. That is a choice. But if the choice is, if your reasoning for that is like, I don't want to make someone mad, and it's more on the, it's more like on the timid side, then yeah, it can be passive. And you should ask yourself, if I sort of do this, am I going to feel bad about myself afterwards? But yeah, sometimes these conversations don't need to necessarily be had. So getting into the techniques, there is one thing that we need to take in consideration, and it is FAE, not Aunt FAE, but FAE. FAE is an acronym. It's a bias. It's fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error is basically that and this is something that, again, as human, we all have it. You just need to acknowledge when it just shows up. Is we think that when we do certain things, it is based on a situation, and when others do certain things, it's based on their character. I will take a non-related example, and we've all been in this situation. You're driving down the road, you're minding your P's and Q's, and all of a sudden this driver cuts you off. In that moment, do you get pissed off like jackass? I'm very raunchy today. Forgive me. Maybe it's because I'm out. Jerk.
There's too much open air.
Right? You jerk. Again. How dare you? And again, we don't know that person. We have no idea the situation. They may be a jerk, but the fundamental attribution error is that we are basing their character on that action, which means that they cut you off, therefore they are a jerk. There's so many other, and I know there's been times when you probably cut someone off, and I'm saying you as I know I have.
And then I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna think this way about me. Ooh, and I forgot I had to get off at this exit.
Yeah, right. It was a situation like again, and so what they teach is in situations like that, like to like and this goes to our thing. What's in our control? There's some things we can get mad. That's in our control, and there's a level of anger we can dial that up to an 11, and then that's where road rage comes in, or curiosity. Curiosity, and this is the whole crux of everything: being curious, and saying, when that happens, practicing, I wonder if they had somewhere to go, or maybe they're not around from around here, and or something like that. Again, because we have no idea what's going on, but what is happening is that we're basing it on the situation, not their character. So these two things, understanding FAE, fundamental attribution error, it comes up, and bringing curiosity to the picture is going to help us in these conversations. So before we go on and talk about some of these in detail, I'm going to pause again. In April, what are your thoughts? And are there any thoughts from Harry in the comments?
I feel like I have a thought on my mind that I'm afraid will like derail the topic. So if it's coming later, then, or if we can address it later, that would be good. But I think there's this thought of, we can't change the other person, right? And we're trying to give people tools to you know, to acknowledge some of these things, to kind of come from a place of curiosity and more compassion. But sometimes the people who we're trying to navigate around don't have these tools. And so how do we navigate that when, we know that this is what we're trying to do, but they're potentially in their bubble and want to do things their way? And, there's this, does it feel fair that like, I know how to handle these conversations, but like, you're still not meeting me halfway. And that can bring more resentment, which then just, you know, keeps the cycle of the conflict or the tension going. And so
Yes.
that's just a question that we can hopefully address.
It's a good point, and I want to address it. And you're absolutely right. We can't control the other person. We're bettering ourselves. And
We can send them this video, right? To just
that could also be a very passive way if you don't set it up with, hey, I found this helpful. You just like sort of, hey, how about you watch this? And they're like, why? Again, a lot of times people don't realize that they're the problem when they're the problem, but but that is a very passive way of just like, hey, watch this. I know I'm guilty of it sometimes. Ask my wife Courtney, I'll send her something, and she will get so, and like that is like her pet peeve. It's like, oh, you're trying to make me better, like you're trying to fix me, huh? Like it's just I'm like, I should probably like set it up, not just like sort of slide it under the door.
yeah.
But getting to your point, yes, and it can lead to resentment, but this is the other thing that you have to like remind yourself, and this is where the curiosity comes from. This is where the sort of grace and whatnot, and then after a certain point, you just have to say, well, forget them. Like they are them, but this is all for you to help you keep your sanity. So, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. So when that happens, this is called, I'm just labeling it as communication jujitsu. So in boxing, what happens is you punch, they punch harder. You punch, they punch harder. With jujitsu, the benefit of jujitsu is you use the other person's weight as a lever to, help them sort of topple over. And so, give me a situation where like maybe you would be like sort of using this and they're not, and I'll show you, how this will work.
Sounds good.
You have an example?
Oh, do I have an example?
Yes.
Oh, an example. Okay. Sorry. I thought you were about to share an example. Sorry.
Yes.
An example of where there's not where it's like you're trying to practice some of these things, but then I think it's if
hypothetical, like it doesn't have to be anything
general,
specific.
like it could be somebody who's super super passionate about something that you have a complete like differing perspective on, and it's like they're just so passionate about that they want to like talk about it all the time, but it causes triggers for you and you want to almost be passive because that there's never going to be, you're going to see eye to eye, but then it's like they just really want to talk about it. And so it's like, how do you put like the invisible earmuffs and just like let them speak, but then and then you're just sitting here like slowly gaining resentment because you're like, I can't say what I'm going to say because if I do, like it will destroy you or something like that, where it's just like I don't even want to go there because I know it'll turn into an aggressive battle. So yeah, is that a good
so then the question that you should be asking yourself is, are you trying to win? Are you trying to change someone? If the answer is yes, then you should say, all right, let me let that go, because the goal should not be that. Then, you should, if it's something that's a repeated action, and that, they're not willing to see it from a different perspective, and it's a trigger for you, this is where boundaries come in and say, hey, this is not something that I like to engage in. So I, respect it if we can just not talk about this.
Okay.
I agree to disagree and sort of move on. And again, so what is happening here is you're not getting brought into the trap
Yeah.
of engaging, because what happens is we have this pattern, and we've done it so many times. I'm going to use like a funny but similar but non, whatever. So if you have a spouse, significant other, you know what that argument's about. You know how it sets up, and you probably see it in your head. You're like, we're going to fight in 5, 4, 3, 2, and then it's like just on. It happens, like,
Battle begin.
right?
It's like what's that? Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know what those are. You know what those triggers are. You know what those buttons are. And it happens again. It's just wiring, just how we are. We have these sort of muscle memory of that. And so the jujitsu, the communication jujitsu, is to realize like, oh, we're going into that. And again, the assertiveness is respecting your own boundaries. You're respecting yourself, and like, I know, like, and they may not consciously be aware that they are getting there. So again, um, giving people the benefit of the doubt is that sometimes we say things and we get into these verbal patterns that we don't even realize we're saying. Matter of fact, I know that I was in this was like a year or so ago. I realized I was in an argument with my wife, Courtney, and I was like, how the heck did we get into this? Darn, I don't even know where this happened, but we're in it. So again, sometimes it just happens unconsciously. And so, again, respecting your own boundaries and letting people, know like, hey, I don't want to. And so this does take courage.
Yeah.
And the assertiveness is, just being very upfront. And again, a passive person, they respect the other person's, they respect them more than they respect themselves. So they're like, well, you know what? I don't want to make them mad. I'm not saying that people are saying this, but they obviously want to talk about this. And they're very passionate about it. And, I'll engage another time. And then and then after you're like, darn it, why did I let myself get upset about that? So
Yeah.
again, you're absolutely right that these things happen. And sometimes people don't know. And the whole thing is more for you than for them, so that you can keep the peace within yourself, so that you don't get resentful, so that you can go on and whatnot. So curiosity is something that we can control,
Yeah.
and when we have curiosity, then that leads to a whole nother situation. When you start to see the world through the lens of a curious person, and you start to realize, oh, all right, that's interesting. Tell me more. And one thing that I learned from Monica, she would, like, in these situations where you're getting in these heated conversations,
Yeah.
she would listen more than she talks. Again, the goal is not to change anyone. The goal is not to win. Is to just to like, oh, all right. And so if you happen to be an introvert, this is something that I learned from a mutual contact of April and Drew Tarvin. He's a big introvert. And people don't realize that about him. They think that, one, because he performs on stages and stuff like that, but he has a tool that allows him to preserve his energy and let the extroverts talk. Is he just asks questions. He tees them up to say something else, and they keep talking. And again, people love to hear themselves talk. And then afterwards, they're like, he just goes on and whatever. So being curious and just asking like, oh, so what do you mean by tell me more. And asking open-ended questions will start to, and if you have your curious lens on, it's not. So this can go one or two ways. This can go terribly wrong, where you end up again, like through the lens of like an attorney. You're asking these open-ended questions so you can say, got you. You're a bigot. That's one way of doing it, but it's just one of those things to hear from their point of view of like what might have got them there. And Monica in the book, she was talking about she would get people of different sort of political stances and have them have conversations. And then one of the things that she would have them do is say, what do we have in common? Where's the common ground? We may not agree on this, but can we agree that we want to keep our kids safe? Can we agree that we want, a better future for ourselves and whatnot? And then, again, if you start to understand what values they hold with that, you can show, you may not agree, like, hey, and so it can go like this. You're asking these questions, and then comes back to you, like, they tee up for you. Like, I don't agree with that, but from hearing you, I can see that you value your privacy, and I can respect that. Yeah, if I saw the world through that lens, I may feel the same way, but I don't.
Mhm.
So, April, I'd love to get some thoughts on you from that.
I'm also wondering from the perspective of, it's acknowledging the other person's value, but I don't know if I don't even know if this is like now a strategy that I'm like, I wonder if I should try this in the future. We talk about values a ton in the ASC, and for me, values are, what drives your character. It kind of gives you a sense of who you are, and your they're kind of your like um what they're the things that drive you, and kind of point you in the direction that you want to do. And the more that you are aligned with your values, the more um the more fulfilled you will be. And so from the perspective of like, it sounds like you value XYZ, in any conflict, and we talk about this a lot in communication, like in any conflict, it is a conflict of values. um so let's say that person values family, and you also value family, but then the conversation is also about um limitation, or like fixation versus flexibility. And let's say you are somebody who values flexibility, and maybe they aren't aware of the opposing value, but being able to sit to communicate and say, you know I'm hearing what you're saying. um I just think that this is causing XYZ emotional feelings, because it conflicts with one of my core values of flexibility and open-mindedness, and so I'm having trouble. So that's to just even like share what your lens is, right? Because every communication is coming
Yes.
from a certain lens. And to be able to, if you can't identify what it is that they value, it's acknowledging maybe the value of yours that is being triggered, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't, if that's all you can do, maybe that's another avenue that you can kind of have that. So it's like, oh, so it's kind of, you know, conflicting with this value that I have. And I'm just curious if, you know, you know, what aspect of this, and turn it back into a curious question. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what is the value, the fundamental value that is beneath this opinion or this feeling that you have on this particular topic? And that is maybe a vehicle to find common ground. It's a little bit more on the assertive space, right? If you want to have it's probably not beneficial if you've already gotten to the aggressive point, right? You'd have to
Yep.
completely like reel back before, but if you're trying to have a constructive, curious conversation, it can also be on that foundation of values, because
That's exactly it.
any
Yeah.
conflict is based on, you know two separate viewpoints and two separate values, and they either align and that's how you find your people, or they're completely disconnected and that's how you. And so it's trying to understand what value they're coming from, because you know there's so many different values that things can be important, and to us, a level of degree that value can be important, right? Like open-mindedness is a huge, it's one of my top values, but it's not like one of the four that I have tattooed on my body. But it's something that I know is important to me. But and I always try to approach every situation with an open mind, because there could be one perspective, but then, if it's like, no, there's only one way, like I cannot get around that, because I feel like everything in my life I've done has been a different way to get to the same result. And so when somebody tells me, nope, it's only this way, I have trouble processing that information, and I don't want to be told any different, because I have proof that there's not only one way in my own life. And so if you can't get on board with that, like if you don't agree with me on that, we should probably stop talking, type of deal. So yeah, that's kind of just what came up for me.
Yeah. and segue to some advice that we got from our friend of the community, Dr. Marcy Beagle. She's a good friend of mine. She's a behavior specialist, and she knows a lot about dealing with conflict and how to resolve that. And a few of the things that she sent me to send to all of you is the one big one, and April touched on this, is prioritizing relationships over being right. She mentioned, while you may be on the opposite sides of a particular issue or topic, you're not in opposition with this person. They are someone you care about, and it's important to remember that as removing that. It's important to remember that as you move through these topics together. The other thing is be in the conversation to understand the other person. It can be, and she says, it can be a hard perspective to take, and it's powerful. So use questions, and we mentioned this. How did you come to this perspective? Or how does believing that support you? And these things can open your eyes and help you see where they're coming from. And this is where you can, as April mentioned, you can, start to see what they value. And here's the other thing. I have to remind myself this. If you're in the ASC, you're probably on this level as well, but I have to remember that not everyone is there. We go through values, every year we review them. Some people, they've never done that. But again, it doesn't mean that they don't have values. We all have values. We all have things that we value. And that's, again, one of the important things of actually going through and doing this exercise is so that you can be conscious about that and you can take conscious action and align it with the things that you value. Because when you hear someone talk, you're gonna find out what they value, what they hold dear. Anyways, the other thing that Dr. Marcia said, we're in conversations often, and we mentioned this. We're in these conversations to convince others of something. This adds to the conflict. Being engaged to understand the other perspective does not mean that you agree. Just creates opportunity to learn about them. And one of the big attributes in order to be able to do this masterfully is to be an active listener. And this goes back to my improv training. We talk about that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much than we speak. And also, when we're an active listener, we're completely present, and we're and this goes back to the coach training that April and I have, is that we're picking up on body language cues. We're picking up on their emotion, so that we can again be in a conversation from a place of assertiveness, not a place of passive or aggressive. Because when you're in that, you're not conscious. To be honest, you are. It's almost like your brain is hijacked, and you're going through like a program. And another thing that I'm going to throw out is this. If anyone's familiar with Gestalt therapy, the psycho therapist, his name is Fritz Perls, I believe. He came up with this Gestalt therapy prayer, and it's something that I remind myself all the time. And it is, I do my thing, you do your thing. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. You are you, I am I, and if by chance we find each other, it's beautiful. If not, it cannot be helped. So it's just, again, something to remember that, at the end of the day, this is about the relationship. It's not about being right. It's not about proving that you're right, proving someone else wrong. It's just understanding. This is where the curiosity comes from. If you can do that, if you can listen actively, if you can ask open-ended questions, if you can see what they value, then you can come to some agreement of hey, we can agree that, that family is important, like I mentioned. We can agree that, yes, we should be allowed to take care of ourselves, defend ourselves. You have a different way of going about that than myself. We can agree to disagree on that. Let's move on to something else. April, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with this. And I think, as you're watching, as you have been, hopefully if you're at this point now, you've been listening and kind of thinking about the different strategies. And what we are hoping that you take away from this call is, everybody's on their own different journey, right? If you're hearing this if you're watching this, you probably are in a situation where you had, some sort of conflicting scenario at a family gathering, or just even on a friend's level too, just and trying to figure out how to navigate that in the best way. And we've given you a whole bunch of tools, but I think, in order to use those tools, we always advocate to try to take a proactive stance um to these situations, right? Because sometimes they just hit us out of nowhere and we're not planning, and then we will automatically respond in potentially the most stressful way possible because we don't have the tools to navigate. And so now we're giving you the tools ahead of time to kind of sit with and process. And what I would like to empower you to do, whether you're watching this live or on the replay, is to think about the upcoming holiday season, right? Well, we're already in it, right? But
Yep.
before you take that trip with your family, before you, um, you know, if you're feeling any sort of anxiousness, I want you to sit with yourself and set some sort of intention. Think about all the tools that we've provided, all the different advice that we've given you. Is there something new that you want to try? Or, think about possible points of contention that may come up, and how you might want to use any of the things that we've discussed today as a tool to address the situation. And now, things may not, you might choose to say, hey, in the name of taking care of myself, I'm going to choose to be passive going into it. But it's setting that intention ahead of time. But if you are in some sort of situation, let's say, you have had conflicts in the past and you want to be able to navigate those conversations a little bit better because you want to be more assertive and share your point of view. It's really almost preparing your talking points, and then knowing when you've gotten too far and it's getting towards the level of aggressiveness that's not healthy, and that, then when do you retreat and revisit it again, or choose not to. But it's really trying to think about what is that one thing that you can go into your family holiday gatherings with, that anticipation and proactiveness, instead of just seeing what happens. And so set that intention. It could be something as simple as, like, I don't want to fight. So, and my tools will either be, I will choose to be passive, or I will choose to say, hey, not now. Or maybe I'll do the like, let's try to understand the values exercise, or the values conflict. Take one of those tools and just try it. There's so many that we've offered. You probably will only have time to execute on one or two of them. I have so many ideas about what I want to do for this coming holiday season for myself, which is great. And but in the future, you have more tools that you can just keep trying. And once you have that, then you can reflect on the situation. If all went well, you guys say, great, let's move on to the next, or let's see if we can build on that. If everything went awry, hey, let's do a postmortem and decide, okay, that didn't work, that strategy didn't work. Let's come back to this video and see what other strategies I can try. And there's still so many more, right? And so that's the big piece. But yeah, and I know that we're running out of time. And if you have been watching this live and you want to, or you watching it on YouTube and you have any ahas, like, I'd love to hear that in the chat. So feel free to leave a comment on the video. Gary, I'll throw it back to you and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, cool.
Unless you
April,
had more to say.
nope, April summed it up.
I
Just
always steal your
to
thunder. I'm sorry.
no, don't trip. It's all good. That's why we're so alike. But yeah, just to summarize it, go into these gatherings with a curious mind, realizing that we are all human. So remove all judgment. Understand, for these hot button topics, understand in advance. How are you going to respond, as April mentioned, and proactive solutions are best. Dr. Marcy put one thing that I'm going to read to you all. She mentions proactive solutions are sometimes the best and most impactful. Who you may have conflict with and over what. She invites you to think, is there a way that you can have a conversation with them ahead of time to mutually agree to avoid that topic? So, for example, just real life, my oldest son, he has this sort of condition that we're working through, and I know it makes him self-conscious. So I told our relatives, like, hey, this is what's happening. Let's just not discuss it around him or anything like that. And everyone was cool. So again, this is an assertive way of just knowing, how you want to show up. And then if you find yourself in these situations, like April mentioned, you have these tools, and you can decide that you're going to walk away. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That is your choice, and you're doing it on your terms. And at the end of the day, we want you to have successful holiday season with your family, and that is it.
All right. And that's it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you at the next webinar, probably in the new year. So hang tight. Thank you so much. accountabilitysuccesscircle.com. Come check us out. Bye.